Okay, students, we're going to talk about how to solve for x, or the variable. How to solve all equations. So first off, you have to know what an equation is. An equation has an equal sign in it. All these have equal signs in it. You can't solve something that doesn't have an equal sign in it. Remember what it's called when it doesn't have an equal sign in it? It's called an expression. So an equation is made up of two expressions. Each side of the equal sign is an expression. Okay, so these are both expressions. And then within expressions, we have terms. Terms are separated plus or minus signs. So here we have two terms. And here we have one term. Okay, so one term and one term. Two terms. Okay, let's review a basic vocab that you should be already knowing from 7th grade on. All right, so how do you solve all equations? Reverse PEMDAS. You've been taught this already, 7th grade and 8th grade. Okay. Reverse PEMDAS, you can say, or you can also call it reverse order of operations, if you want to say it all in words. Okay, so now we talk about applying them and also multiple ways of solving equations. I'm going to show you here at least two different ways. Sometimes three, depending on the setup. So you can always just do the same reverse PEMDAS every time, but there's also other ways of doing it that can help alleviate things and make things easier for you. So I'm going to point those out. Hopefully you've learned some of it already from middle school teachers. Okay, so let's just do one straight up reverse PEMDAS. So I need to solve for a. So that means I got to get rid of this positive 2 and this 4 right here. Okay, well, so I need to know what the opposite operation is. So what is the opposite of this plus 2? That's a minus 2. Then this is a divided by 4. What's the opposite of division? Multiplication. Okay, so if I put that above, those of you who don't know how to solve your equations already, don't know how to do reverse PEMDAS, you might need to write that like that so you know what the opposite operation is. Then I come over here and look, and it says add or subtract first. So it tells me I'm going to subtract that 2 across first. So I'm going to subtract 2 across. Then I get 4 equals a divided by 4. Now I'm going to do the multiplication by 4 on both sides. So I cancel out and I get a equals 16. And there's my answer. Of course, I can check it by plugging it right back in. Okay. And I do 16 divided by 4 is 4 plus 2 is 6. You should be able to check that in your head. It's basic math, elementary school. Okay. Let's do, let's say, those are all the same. Okay, so let's show you a different way now. Now, let's say you don't like dealing with the fractions. I can get rid of the entire, all the fractions. In this case, there's only one. By multiplying by the common denominator, a common denominator. So what's the common denominator? Remember, these are all ones here. So the common denominator is 4. So I multiply by 4 through all three terms. Okay, that gets rid of the denominator. I have no fractions left. So 4 times negative 6 is negative 24. 4 cancels with the 4 right there, so I just get plus x. And negative 5 times 4 is negative 20. Now here's the next rule you always want to remember. Even though it doesn't matter what side of x is on, I always want you to put the x so that the coefficient of x, the number in front of the x, in this case positive 1, is always positive. You're going to put it on, you're going to make the x go to the positive side. Well, it's already positive, so it's going to stay there. So that tells me I'm going to move the 24 across to the other side now. Opposite of negative 24 is positive 24. Okay, so now I get x equals 24 minus 24. Okay, so that's another way. Notice I didn't have to deal with the fractions at all. I got rid of the fraction by multiplying by the common denominator. So these don't like fractions. That's another way to solve it. Okay. Notice this is a positive n over 5. So I'm going to leave it on this side. Move the positive 4 across and makes it negative 4 times n over 5. And then I can just cross multiply. I get a proportion there. How do you solve all proportions? You should already know this. Cross multiply, set equal each other. So n equals negative 20, and I'm done. You could also just look at like I'm multiplying by 5 on both sides as well. If you want to set up as a proportion and cross multiply, you have that as well. Okay, let's come down here. Number 5. Again, if I want to get rid of the 20, I'm going to multiply all terms by 20, distribute the 20 through all three terms. So I have negative 80 equals 20 cancels the 20, so R, and then negative 5 times 100, or 20 is negative 100. R is positive, so it's staying right there. That means I'm going to move the negative 100 across by adding 100. By the way, when I do this, I should be reading this problem as 100 minus 80. You always read the positive first. If there's a positive negative, you don't say negative 80 plus 100. You say 100 minus 80. That's the simplest way. A second grader can answer that question. Third grader, 100 minus 80 is 20. Okay? And there's your answer. So again, I want you learning these different shortcuts. Okay? Now, here's another shortcut. Notice I have a 2. Most people are going to teach you to distribute the 2 through there. You can do that and solve it. It'll always work if you do all the right steps. But it says 2 times that quantity. I can get rid of that 2 by dividing by 2. Now, why am I doing that first? Because first off, this divides in evenly. If it didn't divide in evenly, I would not do it at all. Okay, but it divides in evenly. That gives me smaller numbers to work with. Now I just left with n plus 5 equals, what's negative 2 divided by positive 2? Negative 1. What's the last step? Subtract 5 across. And I get n equals negative 6. Remember, same signs, you add them and keep the same sign. Negative 6. Of course, I could plug that back in if I want to check it. Negative 6 plus 5 is negative 1 times 2 is negative 2. Okay. Let's look over here. Another one just like that, number 19 here. I see 10 divides by each. So now I'm just left with k minus 9 equals negative 1. Opposite of negative 9 is plus 9. So I add it across. K equals 8. 9 minus 1 is 8. Okay. Here's one where I could divide on 21 here, divide each term by 9. Because if I divide it, I have to do all the terms. Like in 19, there's only 2 terms here. That's one term. And that's one term. I divide both terms by 10. Here I'm dividing all 3 terms by 9 because 9 goes into all 3 terms. And then I'm left with just 1 plus 1n equals 1. Subtract the 1 across and n equals 0. You could do that too. Now you could have also just subtracted 9 across and get 9n equals 0. Okay. And that you'll get it that way as well. Here's the other shortcut again. 7 divides by each term here. So it cancels out. So I'm left with 9 plus k equals 12. K is positive, so leave it here. So I subtract the 9 across. And I get k equals 3. I could check that back in. 9 plus 3 is 12 times 7 is 84. Yes. Okay. Here, if we want to practice getting rid of the fraction right away, multiply everything by negative 4. They get negative 32. plus b equals negative 20. Now, the reason I did negative 4 instead of positive 4 because I want the b to be positive. So I don't have to move it to the other side because I always want the coefficient of b to be positive. So now it's positive. Now I'm adding 32 to both sides. Okay, and how should I read that problem? I don't read it negative 20 plus 32. I say it's 32 minus 20. A second grader can answer that. 12. Okay. Now again, I could distribute this, or I could divide by negative 9 right away because negative 9 divides into it. If you don't know that, you can play in your calculator. I get 10 plus x. Negative by negative is positive. 9 goes into 24 2 times. That's 18 with the 6 left over, so drop down to 3, 63. 9 goes into 63 7 times. Last step, divide by 10. I mean, not subtract by 10, I'm on both sides. And I get 17. Okay. Notice by doing this, you're dropping down to much smaller numbers. I'm not going up to negative 90 plus negative 9x and then moving across. Okay. Keep it as simpler numbers. Okay. Let's look up here. Now, these ones here, when I have variables on both sides of the equation, I need to decide which side I'm going to bring the variables to. I could do it either side, but there's one that's smarter. And you want to be smarter and make less errors. You always bring the smaller variable, that's 1, to the greater side, that's 3. So I'm going to subtract the x across. So since the x is going to the right, the constant goes to the left. So I'm going to subtract 7 from both sides. Cancel, cancel. I get 2x equals negative 7, negative 5. Same signs, you add and keep the same sign. Basic integers. Last step, divide by 2. And you get negative 6. So negative 6 is the answer. So you're always bringing the smaller amount over to the larger side. So let's look here. 3 is less than 9. So I'm bringing the 3 over to the 9. So I'm subtracting 3 because that's the opposite. Minus 3x it is. And that means the constant is going to the other side. Negative 21. 9 minus x minus 3x is 6x. And same signs, I add and keep the same sign. Last step, division, and I get negative 6. Okay. Now, look right here on this one right here. We want to get rid of the fractions. So we're going to multiply by 100 through every term. How many terms are here? 1, 2, 3, 4 terms. Distribute 100 for each one. Now, you remember, you need to know from middle school, you multiply by 100, this means move the decimal 2 places to the right. So 1, 2, such as negative 5. The 100 cancels out there, so that's plus x. The 100 cancels out there, so that's just 3x. Move the decimal 2 places to the right, so that's plus 7. Okay, now it looks like the other ones. I take the smaller x to the larger, so I'm subtracting x across, move the constant across. 2x equals, subtract 7 across, it gives me negative 12, and divide by 2 on each side, and you get negative 6. Okay. This is all stuff you should learn from 8th grade math. Okay, let's look at one of these here. Okay. Now, I could distribute the negative 2 through there, but I could also look, remember there's 1 term, 2 terms, and 3 terms. All 3 of those terms, I can divide each one by negative 2. Negative 2 goes into each. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and divide by negative 2 on each term. Okay, it gets me nicer numbers, smaller numbers and nicer numbers. So negative by negative is positive, so it's 8 plus 3v equals, that cancels out, that's just now 8v minus 7. Okay, of course, bring the smaller variable to the larger, so it's subtracting 3v across, which means that I'm moving the constant to the other side, plus 7. Okay, I get 5v equals 15. Last step, divide by 5, and I get 3. You could always check it by plugging it back in if you want. Okay. Now, let's say here, there is no common term in each one, so I'm going to go ahead now to use distributive property. Okay. So I now have negative 24 minus 32n plus 3n, 39 minus 8n. I combine, next step after distributive properties, I combine like terms. So note on each side of the equal sign, there's no, on the left side, there's no terms to combine because that 39 does not have an n with it. I can combine like terms. Okay, so now I have 39 minus 8n equals negative 24 minus 29n. Okay, again, I'm bringing the smaller n over the larger. Negative 29 is smaller than negative 8. So the smaller one goes to the bigger. So I'm adding 29n across. That means the constant is going over here. So I'm subtracting the 39 across. 29 minus 8 is 21n. Negatives or negative and plus two negatives, add to a negative and add the signs. That's 50, 63. And last step, divide by 21. And I get n equals negative 3. Okay. Here, number 7, we need to multiply the two binomials together. That's distributive property. Okay. So x times x is x squared. X times 5 is 5x. Negative 1 times x is negative 1x. Negative 1 times 5 is negative 5. Okay. Now, I go ahead and look. The x squares cancel out because I move 1x squared to the other side or vice versa. It's 0. Now I'm down to just x's. Again, I bring the smaller x. Oops, combine like terms first. 4x right there. 5x minus 1x is 4x minus 5 equals 4x minus 2. Okay, and now you might think, oh, I'm in trouble. Again, doesn't matter. Bring one side over since they're the same. Subtract the 4x across, which means the constant's going over there, plus 5, plus 5. I don't want you to write 0. I want you to write 0x. And 5 minus 2 is 3. Remember, you don't say negative 2 plus 5. You say 5 minus 2. You say the positive one first. Now, when you write 0x, it's easy to figure out the answer. It says 0 times what number gives me 3? 0 times anything is 0, right? So no solution. X equals no solution. See, if you just write 0 there, you might get confused on what the solution is. But when you put 0x there, then you say 0 times what number gives me 3? There is no number. So therefore, there's no solution. Okay. Now, let's look. I'm going to clear all this out. Let's look at, let's say, 15. I have a proportion here. I can write it as 4 over 1. And how do we solve all proportions? We cross multiply. Now, when I cross multiply, if I have more than one term in the numerator or denominator, I must put parentheses around it. So I make sure I distribute that 4 across. So I got 4 times the quantity x plus 2 equals x times 1 is x. Now, 4 doesn't divide by the 1 for do anything, so I'm going to go ahead and distribute this through then. So I get 4x plus 8 equals x. Again, the smaller x over the larger x side every time, which means the constant's going across. And last step, divide by 3. And the answer is negative 8/3. That does not simplify, so I leave it there. I do not change it to a mixed number. Okay. 16. I'm going to erase that now. 16 here. Notice I have fractions. I want to get rid of the fractions. So I'm going to multiply by the common denominator. What's the common denominator between 1, 3, and 9? 9 is. So I'm distributing 9 through how many terms here? Y'all tell me. 4 terms. Draw your arrows so you don't forget. Distribute through each one. So I have 9 times 2 is 18. Plus 9 divided by 9 is 1 times x is x. 9 divided by 3 is 3 times x is 3x. And negative 3 times 9 is negative 27. Again, I bring the smaller x over to the larger x's side. So subtract x across, which means the constant is going to the other side. Add 27. Add 27. So I have 2x equals 27 plus 18 is 45. Divided by 2, and I just get 45 halves. Okay? Okay. Let's do a couple more and we'll be done. 18. I could do the proportions. Okay, put parentheses on those because they have more than one term. So you always put parentheses. I could cross multiply. But here's what I'm going to do instead. I'm going to multiply both the terms. Remember there's 2 terms here. By the common denominator of 15. And get rid of the fractions. So 15 divided by 3 over here is 5. So I'm multiplying 5 times x plus 4. I'm doing the same thing. I'm going to get the same thing doing that. So I can just go ahead and cross multiply. So I get 5 times the quantity x plus 4 equals 3 times the quantity x plus 2. Distribute 5x plus 20 equals 3x plus 6. Again, smaller x to larger x's sides. So I'm subtracting 3x to both sides. That means the constant's going to the other side, minus 20. So I get 2x equals 6 minus 20 is negative 14. Divide each by 2. Okay, and I get x equals negative 7. Okay, you should never have the x and the constant get to the same side. You get the x's or the variables, wherever the variable happens to be, to one side, the constants to the other side. Start using the right vocabulary. I'm going to be asking you in class over and over, what are those called? Terms, expressions, coefficients, constant. Okay, you need to know your vocabulary. Your middle school teacher should be teaching you this. Your vocab, so you come into high school and start using it properly. All right, last one. Okay, let's see. Let's go ahead. All right, we'll go ahead and just do 19. Okay. On this one, I have an integer there. We'll go ahead and distribute first, then see about doing something. Okay, distributed property, negative 10r. Negative times negative is positive 1.5. Okay, then I have half of 4. Remember, 0.5 is a half. So what's half of 4? 2r. What's half of 3? 1.5. Okay, now I'm going to combine like terms. There's my r's, negative 10r plus 2r is negative 8r. 1.5 plus 1.5 is 3 equals negative 64. Now notice, I'm glad this came up. Notice my negative 8r, my variable I'm solving for is negative. I don't want that on that side. So I'm going to move it to the other side. Since the variables are going to the right, this constant therefore is coming to the left. So I'm going to add this 64 across. Okay, so I have 8r over here, positive 8r equals 67. Last step, divide by 8. And that does not reduce. Okay. Oh, dang. Oh, yeah, that's right. 1.5. I was going to see if it was going to come out. I mean, error, I'll have it come out to be a integer, but it doesn't. Okay, so that's just one thing to remember. We always want the coefficient of the variable to go to be positive. So since it's negative here, we go over to the other side. Why do we do that? Because then you don't have to divide by negative. You have to remember all your signs. Remember all your negative signs. It saves you steps to not mess up. The whole point is make less chance for error. All right, we'll stop right there. 25 minutes.